there it was, minding my own business on a Wednesday. Or what day is it? It's Friday. Mr. Weir hit me up about some RC stuff. So we got our Xmaxes out, and we've been Xmaxing the Peacock Pit, because the Peacock Pit is amazing. If you haven't been here before, there's my Xmax. But here's the Peacock Pit. I hope that you've seen the Peacock Pit before, because we've been here many times and it's always a good time. But when you get a weekday call to go do some RC, you try to jump on that. So I got my Xmax number 2. Mark's got his basically stock Xmax, and we're in the middle of doing some upgrades. I already did one servo. I'm doing another servo now, but that's a front of an Xmax. This is the rest of the Xmax, and we're doing a servo, a speed control, a receiver, whole new radio system. It's going to be pretty awesome. We'll try to tune back in when we get something else accomplished, but thank you, Electric Screwdriver. I was working on RC cars, and these guys got a torch out to do bike things.
To smoke crack.
I figured we should take a look at the fire, because if it doesn't come off, don't apply more pressure, apply more heat.
Exactly.
There. Xmax is prepped for install. It's going to be ready for a new servo, new receiver, new speed control. Basically, you take out all of the stock electronics, temp sensors. The only thing I left in there was the fan wire, but everything else gets gutted. That truck is gonna get that speed control along with a radio upgrade. He got himself a new Futaba radio, so we're gonna put that in. That noise is these guys over here working on a bicycle while I work on the truck. So I'm gonna pop this guy open and be right back. So this is Mark's workbench, and these are ideal work conditions when you have all the dirt from the truck on the table. That's how you always want to operate. Pro tip. It's not a pro tip, but this is what comes in the speed control box. It's this super sweet speed control, the Max 6, that's ginormous and will drop right into your Xmax. Some extra motor wires in case you do custom installs, battery wires, some mounting tape, your best friend in the whole wide world, the instruction manual, and some rad Hobbywing stickers. Inside of this, you get a couple zip ties and all that stuff as well. So I'm gonna put that off to the side. But all we really need for this is the speed control. We're going to wire this up after it gets installed with his track system. So when you install your new Max 6 in there, you wanna make sure that your speed control can wiggle. I took the stock piece of mounting tape and I folded it in half, so it's half the size. And I used that. See how the speed control can wiggle? That's some shock dampening right there, so that when it flat lands or whatever, you're not gonna run into so much damage for your electronics. I try to make sure it's not touching the walls on either side. And then when I put my input harness down, I try to loop it down to the bottom of the chassis and then back up to the radio box, so there's a little bit of wiggle room there, so that thing doesn't have any tension on it once you put the radio box in. Now, on the top here, the motor wires are just gonna plug right into the speed control, ABC, blue, black, white I use a C, and then we'll figure the direction out later. But you may find it's easier to plug these in if you cut this bar off, which I do often. All right, so got the radio gear all hooked up with the new receiver. Always the speed control goes in channel number 2, the servo goes in channel number 1. Universal truths in RC, that the throttle is 2, steering is number 1 if it's not marked. It'll always have a number, and you just got to make sure that they line up, because there's an extra slot down there. Some people will plug their steering down to that one and get everything off by 1. You'll turn your wheels, your motor will run, or whatever the case may be. So just make sure you check all that. Pro tip when you're plugging your stuff into your receiver. Because we removed all the other items out of the Traxxas system, all that's left is the antenna wire for the receiver, which loops through their little box, and then the fan harness I have plugged into any of the auxiliary channels. Your speed control's BEC is going to power the receiver and whatever else is plugged into it, so the fan is going to run off of the receiver just like it did. So for this installation, we're going to try to retain his Traxxas plugs. I'm not a fan of Traxxas plugs. See how the plug is kind of like smaller than the size of the wire? A lot of times Traxxas plugs don't work good with high power setups, but we're going to give it a shot. So I'm taking the install off of his stock speed control. All I did was pop if you push on the end of these from the inside of the plug with a screwdriver, they'll pop out, and I'm going to solder these leads onto the end of these and then put it all back together. Pretty straightforward swap. All right, so I took the brass part out of the stock plug. You just push on it with the pliers and you grab it and you solder these guys on it. It's probably way easier to do this out of the truck, but if you have a friend that holds in a pair of pliers, it works out real good. But the main thing that you're looking at with solder joints is that the wire is not floating in solder. I got the wire all the way down on the connector, and it's not sitting in a bubble of solder. So that's what runs into a lot of shutdowns, overheating problems. On Traxxas plugs, there's a line that I have bled the solder over, but the idea is to keep your wire behind the line so that this guy goes back in the plug correctly. If it doesn't click into place and get all the way out to the end like that one is, it's not going to get full connection. You're going to be missing part of your contact, and that's a big problem too, so watch out for that. So this is the problem. The wire is too tall and it won't go into the plug and seat all the way. So we're going to try to mash her down a little bit more and get it in there. So if it doesn't seat and click in easily and you have to smack it in with a screwdriver or something, that's not it. You want to make sure that it goes in easily. It took some doing, but we got them in there. We had to resolder it once, and then I had to do a little hand sculpting with the old carving knife to get it, the extra solder that I laid in there out. But this side went in just fine. So we got the series connectors back on so it can run dual battery packs. The motor's gonna plug in. We're just gonna drop them right in there, and probably this guy looks like he needs to get cut off. Maybe not. Using this thing and this thing, it broke these pieces off so we could plug the motor wires in, and that should take care of it. Look at that one-handed camera action. 1, 2. Wow, hold on. I'm gonna try to seat that down in there. You want to make sure that these motor plugs go all the way down into the speed control, because if they're loose, you'll smoke that plug real easily because it makes a resistance point. So make sure that you get those guys. Like, see this one? The insulation that's on the wire is kind of jamming up, so. There we go. Alright, so we got those guys all the way in there, and see how the speed control can still wiggle? That'll do wonders to help with the shock damage. So we got our plugs, we got everything plugged in. I'm gonna button this guy back up. There's some more, we gotta put the front end back on the truck too. Alright, well that's the install. If I had anything to say, I'd say scooch the speed control back as close as you can to that back wall without touching, because the antenna mount wants to hit the front of the speed control. I still got, you know, a decent amount of wiggle here, but we're all set up. New radio installed, bunch of steering parts, new servo. Check the endpoints, make sure that it doesn't like buzz the servo when you go full left or full right. You usually want to do that with the truck up in the air, but I did that already. But we were able to reuse the stock connectors, and we'll see how it goes. We're gonna leave it on default settings for now, give it a run, and see if it needs any setting changes, but should be fine. They work great. We did a test run with the truck, and the new servo and the steering linkage and all that stuff was awesome. It had way more steering. So much so that it actually broke the update link, the little whatever plastic Heim that comes with it. It pulled through and wore out the other side. So we put the stock link back on and we loosened that hot racing servo saver. So if you do all of the upgrades to your front end, don't tighten the servo saver all the way down. Mr. Weir did the official test drive. He said the new speed control is way better. It's got way more linear throttle response, as we all know. So that's fun updates of the Xmaxx. Corwin's rig is super dialed. He got better tires. He's cheated. So this is Mr. Wheeler behind the wheel of the freshly updated Xmaxx. Still a stock motor, still a stock gearing. It's got Durtrex Xmaxx tires on it. Corwin put how much lead in the front?
A few ounces.
4 or 5 ounces in the front, like taped it to the shock tower. The jack with the ride height. And it's got a bunch of hot racing steering parts in the front end and the upgraded Xmaxx servo from Traxxas. And of course, a sweet Hobbywing Max 6 on default settings. Oh, and the radio system got replaced because Corwin didn't like the Traxxas hand grips, which no one does. And Mr. Weir is ascending. It's like a race truck now. Most of the performance, like making it better, comes from the tires because they don't grow. Like his truck, even with a stock servo, was better than our trucks.
Oh, you suck!
Yeah. But once we put the servo in there, it was game over.
The whole truck.
Dude, best friends ever. Thanks, Mr. Weir.